Everybody, wait a minute. Well, everybody, wait a minute. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Let's go. What's up, everybody? What's up? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like. Sunshine, everybody. There's not a lot of sunshine up here this morning, but We're going to laugh. We're going to dance. We're going to live our lives. Happy Black August, or Black August resistance is the call, I should say. Tell somebody to join you this morning. Get some of this boom bap breakfast. We have a lot to get into. We're going to talk a little bit more about Dr. Turner. Turner taught me. Hashtag Black Capitalism is still a real problem. And a little more on the Cryptoganda madness. I just submitted my article. Shout out to Vibe Band. That's VYBE. At DC Vibe and or your social media. Check them out. And if you get to see them live, as I have on many occasions at this point, they do not disappoint. Shout out to the Pocket. Shout out to the Go-Go community. Shout out to DC. Shout out to the salsa that I mixed into this joint, and African people all around the world. It never fails. I'm so glad I've started incorporating this in my show, because every time, man, my mood, it elevates immediately. And I hope it does the same for you. Let's go. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Let me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh man, let me get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh no. Shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh my goodness, I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh my goodness. What's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Tree. I'm taking on three of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh my goodness. Behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't gotta look. It's falling. Oh my goodness. This guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media again. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right. Yes, indeed. Right on. Welcome back again. Greetings, everybody. What's up, Lucy? Rozelle Bo, Keontae, Dead Man Animations, Peace Joe. Welcome everybody again. Sugar Booger, always good to see you. Shirley as well. Thank you all for joining me this morning. I hope you all are as well as could be expected. Definitely love all. Show revolutionary Black August resistance love to all the buttons. And help what we're trying to do here at the channel, and let somebody get some of this good boom bap breakfast. It's going to be, might be a little bit of a shorter show. Faculty meetings, semesters gearing up, you know. But a number of things to get to this morning, and hopefully get you set up for a full week. The Remix Morning Show returns this week, live and direct. So thanks to all of you who have been supporting the Runbacks and Ear Doctor, who definitely got busy last night in his happy birthday to hip hop joint. No question. In fact, I was watching. I didn't join the chat. I stayed out of the chat because I was actually finishing up the last bit of touches on this Cryptoganda essay, which is finally done, and I submitted it this morning. I'll let you all know when it gets posted on the Propaganda in Focus website, and I'll invite your criticism and your constructive criticism as you help me reshape it into the chapter it will eventually become in altered form for the second edition of the Buying Power book. But I wasn't in the chat, but I was checking, had it on in the background. And Ear Doctor, I mean, he's a beast. There's just, you know, Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Uh and partially, Shirley, partially. Baby girl's got knee surgery coming up, so she had to come back early. But you know, everybody's doing well. Thank you. I hope all of yours are well too. Yeah, it's too short. The breaks are too short. We work too hard. That's why I go check. That's why you go check the video. The right to be lazy. We have a right to be lazy. So work too hard. So just a couple things very quickly. I did take a drive up on Saturday to Ithaca, New York, to say our final goodbyes to Dr. James Turner, who was laid to rest. And so all respect to his widow, Janice Turner, and all of the children and the grandchildren, and all of his close family and friends. It was a bit of a surreal experience, and unfortunately for me, I found that in addition to saying my personal goodbyes quietly to Dr. Turner, I think I was saying goodbye also to the center and to Ithaca. I'm not sure I'll ever be up that way again. I understand there's going to be a larger commemoration of Dr. Turner, but I might be traveling when that finally gets put together. I don't know. So I don't know. And then I couldn't help with the sense. I mean, obviously it was a sad occasion, and they brought Dr. Turner from the funeral home back to the Africana Center so that they could have another service there and sort of honor the institution he helped create and led in its creation, and then sort of his final time in that space. And so in some way, maybe I just was, I don't know, projecting, but I felt it appropriate for me to be saying goodbye as well, because it was great to see Scott Brown. I didn't get to build with folks. I was I went, it was I couldn't stay for the entire second service, so but I got to at least see Scott Brown and Sophia Elijah and Dr. Asi Lumumba, who was recently a guest on this program. She gave a very powerful statement, a very Pan-African, and talked about how Dr. Turner has respect literally all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world, people are commemorating him, honoring him, sending their honor. I mean, and saw Rosa Clemente, and I didn't recognize, so I'm not sure, James Conyers, Dr. James Conyers, who I hope to get on this show to talk about his time, because he grew up with Turner, so it was great to build with him briefly. But really what I was thinking is, and I don't know to what I had nothing to do, and I don't know any of the details of how this was put together. But it felt odd that I don't know. There weren't a lot of the old guard faculty there. I know I don't know. I don't know. And the new guard wasn't there, obviously. But to be fair, I don't know to what extent. Let me just chill on that, because I don't know to what extent I didn't recognize people because we all had to wear masks. I don't know to what extent I missed people coming and going. So let me just chill on that about who was and wasn't there and why they wouldn't be there. So let me not speak to that. But my point really is that it felt appropriate to me to be saying goodbye in sort of in totality, to Turner himself, to the space, and to that moment, and I hope to have him on to talk about it too. But Scott Brown said something to me that I think is appropriate to share at least a little bit of the other day that I think is important, that on some level we can't lament too much the loss of that initial spirit that developed this Africana Studies and Research Center there. That as Dr. Brown was saying, between people like himself and others, and to a lesser extent me and others, we are all carrying on that tradition and that legacy wherever we are, and we shouldn't expect to try to hold and capture it in one space for that long. And I struggle with that, but I mean, I did find some peace in that idea, in that concept, because that space is certainly, the battle there has been lost. Maybe the war, but the battle certainly there it's so, but I don't know. I don't have anything more clear than that to say at the moment, other than I just wanted to again, raise up his name, and I look forward to again having others come on to build and talk more about him and his work, and I'll continue to do it as well. But I did note I drove up and taking the drive up to Ithaca. It's beautiful scenery. I mean, it's the Susquehanna Trail and all that, Pennsylvania west out going up to New York State and all that. It's beautiful scenery. But I couldn't help but thinking it's odd that on the way to commemorate Dr. Turner, I ended up thinking so much about white folks, because the drive up is a reminder again of how much poverty in white communities there are. And I couldn't help noticing that the poorer or the more humble the dwelling, the more extravagant it seemed was the overt symbolic praise for the country. Like wherever I saw the biggest American flags, for instance, were on the most humble of dwellings. And I couldn't help but thinking like, white folks, shame on yourselves, like all this genocide and enslavement and colonial takeover, and you don't even take care of your own. How dare you leave your own living in such humble conditions in the 21st century, all up and down this coast? Anyway, so then it made me think of what will be sort of the theme in the context today, what Dr. Turner, as I mentioned last show, it was that elaborate conspiracy of the internal colonialism dominance of African people. But we have to remember that colonialism obviously has its impact on the colonized, but it's also has a negative impact on even segments of the colonizers' community. And that was evident on the way up. That was crazy. It's crazy to be reminded of that, because the white folks I see around where I live on a daily basis, for the most part, this is the solidly middle to upper middle to affluent for the most part. I don't often see the depths of white poverty. I see the depths of Black poverty more just in my routine travel, social, political, and literal job in Baltimore. But the white folk, like, good gracious, white folks should be ashamed of yourselves for that treatment of your own after all of this conquering and accumulation of tremendous wealth in your own community. Oh, it's shameful. And that's why, for all the debate within the Black community about Marx, we have to be reminded that Marx was initially talking about his own people. It was like, look at how capitalism forces us to treat each other, never mind those we enslave and colonize. All right, anyway. So in wrapping up the I'm going to stay out of the chat and the comments for now, but I will come back before we wrap up. So if you please make a note of anything you want me to address. I know you all do quite well on your own, and I'll come back towards the end and check in. But so one of the ways that I've found I end up commemorating Black August because I don't go as hard as I know we should, and Kalanji encourages, and but one thing I have noticed that happens sort of automatically is I do revisit a lot of the literature and the history. And for the essay that I was working on, I did want to go back and try to look at, well, because I have been not so good at this in the past I will talk about these histories and people, but not often refer to specifically what they said about these situations. So I wanted, what is BlackAugust saying about Black capitalism? What has the tradition or the people who have comprised or been the center of that tradition in that history, what have they said about Black capitalism? Because that, in fact, because my essay is the and how I've approached it eventually for the second edition of the Buying Power book is that Cryptoganda rebrands the elaborate conspiracy of Black capitalism. So I borrowed again and increased my reference to Turner again for this, and I want to do better going forward. Because I have been guilty of it. I have focused too much of my attention on Turner in hearing his lectures and being in his presence, literally, for hours in the office. We used to sit for hours just sitting in his office, just listening, asking questions. Anyway, but I haven't often referred directly to his written work. And that was, again, something I think Scott Brown did a great job of doing, having people write about it and then including some of that work in his discourse on Africana. I keep forgetting the title. And now, what did I do with the book? Yeah, it's right here. I was just referring to it. Discourse on Africana Studies, JamesTurner and Paradigms of Knowledge. So I wanted to so anyway, the title of the piece is Cryptoganda Rebrands the Elaborate Conspiracy of Black Capitalism. So I wanted to go back and look at, well, what have folks been saying about this? Because, I talk a little bit about it in the first edition, but wanted to mention some more in this, even in this essay, and that it's like we've already had this debate. And again, one of the greatest contributions of Mehrsa Baradaran's book, The Color of Money, is in her reminding of this, that she covers well that so many Black economists, never mind the radical lunatics that we're going to talk about today, and that I count myself among, but Andrew Brimmer is the name in particular that, I believe it was a Harvard trained economist, White House, employee, like a mainstream dude. But even he was like, Black capitalism don't work for Black people. Obviously, the radical lunatics like James Boggs and George Jackson, and even to a lesser extent E. Franklin Frazier and Earl O'Farrill and other, even again, I read The Myth of Black Capitalism by Earl O'Farrill because I saw that it had been on a list of books that were found in George Jackson's cell. So even books with the title The Myth of Black Capitalism have been published, but people have been saying, so what I was just ultimately trying to say in this essay is that what Cryptoganda is doing is, again, just rebranding old arguments. Like, we've already done all of this. It's like what Daruba says all the time. We've already won these battles. We just don't know our history. We already had this argument. And yet somehow we find ourselves in the 21st century back again with, I think, more than ever, an increased rebranding of black capitalism, which I do think is working negatively against us in all of our collective efforts in organizing, in academic, journalistic, whatever kind of work, in trying to push other narratives. All right, so I did go back to one of the sources I went back to for this was that BLA study guide, where of course it's discussed here. And just in this section here, comparing the richest black person to the ruling class is like comparing pennies to the $1,000 bill. It's also the primary reason the myth of black capitalism by any black person, group, or organization will always remain just that, a myth. The ruling class has so much more capital than any black group that they can afford to let any black capitalist group build up a certain amount of capital, industry, land, and businesses until the blacks have invested all their money, then break them overnight as easily as one breaks a matchstick. And to the narrow focus that I was engaged in up until this morning, in fact, isn't that exactly what cryptoganda and the crypto world does, or is attempting to do right now? No matter, with all of the Hill Harpers and Earn Your Leisures and whoever, and saying invest in crypto, invest in this, invest in that. Even if black people adopted and invested at the levels that Hill Harper and Jay-Z and others are saying should be done, the buildup of all of that cannot match, cannot equate to, cannot outpower what is accumulated and made available to white communities or organized capital. They cannot. There is no competition. So black people can invest in crypto all they want. The white elite, as we're already seeing, and I just looked at the numbers again for this essay, the white elite can accumulate and marshal so much wealth and so as to buy out or undercut or break them overnight as easily as one breaks a matchstick. There is no black capitalist buildup of capital in industry, land, or business that can rival. Again, so it's the extrapolation of my argument around buying power. There is not enough that can be accumulated that can rival what has been accumulated elsewhere. And just in terms of I was just looking at it again, the latest. According to that Bitcoin rich list database, I mean, it's crazy that people are still, by my calculation, according to what they showed in the data there, roughly 92% of Bitcoin are held in less than 3% of all the wallets. So of the millions of wallets that are out there, 3% have 92%. I'm saying at least 92% of all the Bitcoin in them. Anyway, so I just wanted to point that out, at least very quickly, that from the most radical to the most conservative, black economic analysis that is at all honest and focuses on data and experience shows that black capitalism cannot be used as a pathway towards power, equality, parity, whatever you want. It does not, it cannot occur that way. Similarly, in this study guide, by the way, when they get to the definitions, am I still sharing that? No. When they get to sort of the glossary of terms, Black capitalists are included in the definition of a Black collaborator. Those few Blacks brought into the capitalist system at all levels, including such high levels as Black capitalists, project directors, administrators, etc., who have enough of a stake in the operation of the system to cooperate in pacification programs against their Black brothers and sisters, the house niggers. So I get it. This is the study guide of the Black Liberation Army. But as we've talked about beforehand, with Dhoruba directly himself including, just as I said of George Jackson the other day, whatever we feel, whatever comfort level we have with their conclusions, they are born of a clear and detailed and well-organized analysis. So if folks go back and read that entire study guide, or read the build up to the conclusions, for instance, in Blood in My Eye, or even Soledad Brother from George Jackson, it is clear that, again, however we may feel comfort-wise with the conclusions, they are born of an actual analysis. There is an argument that people who would want to disparage or diminish these conclusions would have to deal with if they're being honest. So as even in that one Turner essay that I've been working from, where he talks about the elaborate conspiracy against Black people, he's talking about, again, the internal colonialism process, which requires a relationship that does not make room for people from the colonized, among the colonized, to develop businesses that will rival the not only the productive and wealth producing capacity of white folks, but that would even be able to serve the needs and interests of Black people. All that's ever happening is the interests of a handful of a Black bourgeoisie that, as the BLA study guide rightly points out, is itself powerless relatively. That's all that is, but that's all that can at best be developed. And I'm certainly not interested in that. All right. So then another thing, I did try to make use of the 10 hours round trip that I was in the car Saturday, which I love doing, by the way. I've always enjoyed that, even when I'm by myself. Sometimes it's better for me to be by myself. I don't mind a car ride. So I did put it to some use. And one of the things, because I was, I knew I had to finish this essay, and one of the things that I came across was a podcast discussion. And I just want to play one little excerpt as it relates to not only the work I turned in, but to the general discussion here of, as I would describe it, how is the elaborate conspiracy that Turner talked about framed or marketed to us? So in the context of cryptocurrency, I listened to this discussion on, pull it up here. Sex Lies
I guess,
and Ponzinomics, Marketing in Crypto, featuring Adam Singer, who you see on screen here, who is a marketing executive with a pretty fascinating and extensive career in marketing. And he is I put the links to all this in the show description if you want to see and listen to the whole thing. It is of value if you want to understand both marketing from the perspective of marketers and a little bit more about the Cryptoganda world. But Shout out to Roberto, who you might hear a little bit in the background there. But what I like about this, and what I like about hearing from folks like this, is that it is the polar opposite politically from where many of us are coming. And he is just a cold, calculated marketer. I mean, if you listen to the whole discussion, I mean, he really does. He talks about that. I mean, he's like, I'm only interested. I'm not a producer of anything. I'm not, he's even somewhat self-deprecating. He's like, look, we're not doing rocket science. I'm here to separate people from their money. I'm here to get them to buy things that people hire me to get them to buy. I'm here to manipulate you. I'm here to mess with you. And when he's asked a little bit about cryptocurrency, he says, look, I'm not a believer. And then he says the following, which I find quite helpful.
I guess the other problem for me is, like, you guys know, I'm not like super, I'm not a believer, right? I'm not a believer of a lot of it. I can understand the digital gold narrative of Bitcoin. I actually think that the most impressive part of Bitcoin to me as a marketer is the marketing. Like, that's a real brand that they market. You can love or hate it, but the fact that is a global brand that doesn't have like a marketing team marketed is actually that should be a textbook case study of organizing without organizations and how an actual brand in the world arises from it. So from that perspective, it's actually very cool.
I have a quick question relating to precisely the company that you brought up before, talking about mercenary marketing. You mentioned McKinsey, and shout out. I have a good friend out there who works for them.
Yeah, they're huge. They're not all bad, obviously.
Right, but here's the deal: is I just want to in your suggestion, it was like, well, I think if you're going to be a mercenary company like this, ultimately those decisions are going to come back to haunt you, and it will probably cost you, ultimately, if it's a bunch of bad decisions over and over again, cost you everything. You would, I guess, in a sense, hope. But I'm just looking through the controversy section for Wikipedia on McKinsey. We have Enron, the 2008 financial crisis, Valiant, role in the opioid epidemic, Rikers Island jail complex, fine for insider trading by investment affiliate, accusations of conflicts of interest in U.S. bankruptcies, controversial clients, and association with authoritarian regimes.
What a list.
It's a long, long list. They've existed for almost 100 years now. They have 38,000 employees and a revenue of $15 billion last year.
And they're the ones who took an ungodly amount of money to try to make CNN Plus a thing.
Right.
So we see how good they are when they're actually given a marketing challenge to build something and not just do reputation management damage. Look, here's
the fuck is he talking about? Message.
My bad, hit the wrong drop. Although both will work because what so okay, so first there are two things there that I loved in that I wanted to share. The first is that he says, look, I don't even believe in this crypto stuff, but if you look at how the brand of the digital gold narrative was developed, that is, just as Hill Harper and others have been saying, look, this is the gold rush. This is our chance. Just as the Spike Lee commercial for crypto ATM, this is our chance to get in at the ground floor. Unlike before with the old money, with the old land, with the old internet, with the old, we can now get in at the ground floor and be part of that initial mass accumulator of this ever increasing in value, ascending asset value class, as Hill Harper likes to say. You know what? What was I watching where, oh man, I was just watching something where this guy was saying, wow, I didn't put this together for the essay. I got to remember what I was looking at. So I just ended up watching some. I just realized this. So this guy Singer is talking about the digital gold rush narrative that has been generated around crypto. This idea that everybody can go out west and get their picks and shovels and dig up that gold and get rich. Get in early on crypto, or get in now on crypto, because eventually when Bitcoin in particular becomes adopted as a currency, like Hill Harper says, they're going to have to come through us. But I just watched something where this business person was saying, what was I watching? It's a dramatic piece too, so it's likely entirely fictional. But the business person was saying, I don't want to be, because the comparison was made in their context to not the digital, but to the gold rush, and he said, but most of the people who went out there with their picks and shovels. That's what it was. It was in the HBO drama, the new series Industry. And which is about finance and investment. And the sister that's the trying to make her way in the investment world is trying to pitch to this venture capitalist to get his money. And he says, I don't want to hear from you unless this is something like a pick and axes moment. And she says, this is. Then he responds and says, but I don't just want to be the guy with the picks and axes, because most of the people who went out there digging for gold failed, lost their money. This is actually crazy relevant. He said, I want to be the manufacturer of the picks and the axes. Because whether you find gold or not, I'm getting paid. And he was saying, that's the level I want to be at. You all have probably already gotten it better than I have, but somewhere in there is this there's something perfect happening here. I'll have to think more about it and come to your comments in the chat in a bit to get caught up. But anyway, that's what Singer is saying. Then he's saying I don't believe in cryptocurrency. I don't believe in any of this stuff as having any real value. What I do believe in as a marketer is the power of the narrative that has been evolved to convince so many people that this is a life-changing opportunity. And in the essay I wrote, I do try to parse out the difference in terms of the marketing in drawing comparisons between Matt Damon and LeBron James's commercial, that there is a message for everybody, but they're delivered with a particularity, with a specific specificity. So Damon's message was targeting white men and manifest destiny and whiteness and imperialism. LeBron James's commercial was targeting the colonized, the immature, the financially illiterate. And I thought it was quite clear when you go back and look at the commercials, particularly back to back, as I did a few times. It's powerfully clear what they're saying and who they're talking to and how they're talking to the colonizer versus the colonized. The second part of that clip is that they talk about, because not for this essay, but for the second edition of the book, I am looking more at how to incorporate a discussion of McKinsey and Company, who I do think are increasingly becoming, or have become in the last few years, one of the dominant voices in projecting the falseness of the condition of Black people economically, and including the mythology of buying power. And they've even come up with their own way, apparently, of arriving at the very same number, or a similar number of the $1.6 trillion in spending power. But again, their point is to connect that with ad revenue and corporations, to separate that money from Black people, into the hands of corporations. And what I liked about what he's saying there, because what Singer, in the other part of the conversation, Singer is hating on McKinsey heavily. Like in an article we looked at, I think a week or so ago, I showed you how McKinsey is often considered to be the hot spot for up and coming geniuses. But from this guy's perspective, he's saying that's where all the people end up who can't make it on their own and who don't have any real skills. So they just find themselves in a mid-level position at a big, giant super company, as opposed to working in smaller shops as his, where you actually have to know what you're doing and produce and do So that's why he was sort of happy to hate on McKinsey by saying, really their only value is not in producing anything other than brand management, reputation management. That's all that they're doing. So my argument will ultimately be McKinsey, as it relates to Black capitalism, Black economic condition, they're only here for reputation management, to manage the reputation of capitalism, of Black capitalism, by telling Black people, you don't need political power, you don't need redistribution, you just need financial literacy. And as it relates to the corporate and advertising community, McKinsey is simply saying, you don't need to be concerned about the actual condition of these people. You just need to know that this is how they spend what little money we allow them to have, so that they can participate in the economy and make us rich. So it's fascinating just to hear that they're discussed in this that they're basically a failure when it comes to everything other than managing the reputation of some failing entity. In the show description, by the way, just as it relates to this, I'm not going to play any of it, but I put it in there. There's a second episode of that same podcast that I put in there that I listened to as well, where they talk about, which I will write about in the second edition, I believe. I just wanted to note it here this morning quickly, that Coinbase, the largest, I believe is still the largest exchange in the US for cryptocurrencies, is being investigated by the Security and Exchange Commission for, to the extent I understand it, I don't think it's insider trading. I think it's fraudulently selling securities that, and ultimately what the discussion was on that podcast was kind of like what I think Reggie Middleton was up to in our debate is that if these currencies are traded as currencies, then they are securities and can be regulated by the SEC, which is more funded than any of these other entities and more likely to scrutinize and catch fraud. If they're defined as tokens, they can be traded as commodities, which has a different and much lower level of scrutiny and allows for sort of a kind of manipulation that Coinbase apparently has been engaged in. But what their ultimate, so I have to go back and really catch on to what is being said here, but they were talking about that this could be an existential crisis for Coinbase and other exchanges if it is ruled that what all of these exchanges are doing is somehow fraudulent in terms of the SEC's view, and ends up being regulated differently. Now, one thing that they did say that I do see in some of these discussions is that some advocates of these currencies want more regulation, because they want the regulation that would have to come with adoption as a national currency, which as I've been saying from the beginning, is why you need political power, and why why would that be good, and why would the US allow for that? So when people were advocating that Bitcoin is going to replace the US dollar and there's nothing these states can do about it, they don't seem to understand how any of this works. They should definitely go read Michael Hudson's work and many others, but they seem to have missed that entire point. By the way, as I was just reading in one of these, now I can't remember where I was getting it, but the point that they were talking, that the point is also that states will look to destroy through policy currencies that threaten their own, so that they can protect the value of their own currency. So the idea that the government, the state itself, was going to watch cryptocurrency supplant the power of its own dollar is absurd. And as we're seeing with increasing regulation, with increasing oversight and looking into, that seems to be where things are headed, but not so that Bitcoin or any other crypto can be adopted as currency by the state, but so that they can be crushed as potential competitors, which for all you Bitcoin investors is probably going to be a problem for the value of your investment. But that's, I don't, All right. Now, so that's for the crypto portion of the show this morning, good people. That's the crypto specific. It's all, in other words, if you're holding Bitcoin, it's probably not going to be good for you. And I know you're hoping that you can, and I know all of you Cryptogandists are now listening and saying to me,
"It's wrong, bro."
All right, but anyway, I will continue to look into that, and as you all offer up constructive criticism of the Cryptoganda piece once it's published, I will come back to these things and try to tighten up and clarify any of my argument as is necessary, or writing. Oh man, we got to do another. I'm compiling the criticism, so keep putting your comments in the comments, positive and critical. And one that I'm going to address has a point. I think it's a he, but the comment was saying, basically you're all over the place. You're not organized in your thought. And and to a certain extent, I agree. That is one of my biggest problems. I think, I'm seeing connections and pieces all over the place, and I do have a hard time putting it together. So I'm not mad at that. It was a little hostile. We'll come back to that. The critique was a little hostile, but not entirely untrue. But who sent me this? I think I can pull this up real quick, because one of the other day I did watch something else that relates to this problem of the elaborate conspiracy and where we, So this is finally I can give credit where credit is. Black Phillip, boy, oh boy, Black Phillip. I think you owe me one. Because I watched what you sent me, and I'm only going to impose a very brief clip of this because they end up referencing buying power. But let me say it this way, start off by saying it this way. Let me do this first. I mix what I like. All right. Let me say this. I love what we are attempting here at BPM, because as I continue to say, we are woefully losing the struggle over narrative and the creation of a radical public sphere among African people, or just radical, whatever you want to call it, but particularly pertaining to the African diaspora. I think we are in a woeful position in organizing our collective public media, journalism, academic work, and creating a public sphere where more of us are involved and engaged with one another beyond individual presentations, arguments, shows like this, etc. I get that individual shows end up creating a public sphere as they echo and reflect and respond to one another, but not in any sort of overtly organized attempt to bring everyone into one sort of space. And when I was the discussions, the context of the discussions that occur here are generally very different, even when the topic may be the same. So when I watched this discussion that Black Phillip sent, hosted by Dr. Boyce Watkins, and saw first that Professor James Small was involved, I thought immediately how great it was that we have an interview and a discussion with Professor Small hosted by Kalonji on this platform that is very different than the one in which he was involved here, that included a brother named Maj Toure, who I don't know anything about or much about, but is about, you know, the Second Amendment brother and about, you know, Black Guns Matter and all that kind of stuff. And Rizza Islam, who I do know a little bit about and have heard from, the very increasingly popular spokesperson of the Nation of Islam, and one, you know. So one reason I'm not going to share too much of the conversation is because on one hand, to be fair to these brothers, the discussion they were having was not meant to be in depth. It was not meant to be focused on one topic. It was meant to, I think, be more of an overview of all of their thinking and like an introduction of all of their thinking to one another, to the audience, maybe to promote some other things that Boyce is involved in or that they're involved in. You know, so I don't want to be, on the one hand, it's clear we disagree, but I don't want to be disrespectful in the sense that I don't want to suggest that what they were saying here is an adequate or fair representation of any of their arguments. Again, which I still think would be disagreeable to my own, but just trying to be fair here. But there were a number of issues that I at least want to point out that I think are reflective of the moment we're in. And I can't help but be putting in the context of the passing of Dr. Turner, because I feel like even as he, you know, for instance, you know, Ron Daniels was set to be the lead spokesperson at this service the other day. Because he couldn't be there, they replaced him with Professor Len Jeffries. Now, Jeffries and Daniels were much closer to Turner for much longer than I was, obviously. They are part of his crew, his peer group, etc. But there are clear political differences between the three. Very, very, very stark, clear differences. To Turner's credit, he was in alignment with the entire African world, which is why the whole world is mourning right now, which is why everybody from every end of the spectrum is in some level of mourning right now over his loss, his passing. But the differences politically do exist, and I think do need to be discussed, not between Turner and those folks per se, but the differences that they represent that are playing out even in this conversation need to be discussed, and those of us of a certain politic, we have to, I don't know, we have to find a way to better organize and magnify our message, which is again my point in trying to do this project with BPM. So, because for instance, the very beginning of the conversation, I put the link in the show description so you can all watch it on your own and catch anything I missed or correct anything I've gotten wrong. But from the very beginning, they introduce these folks, does Boyce in particular introduces these folks, and by extension himself, as sort of the most unafraid, radical, freest Black men on the planet. Those that the mainstream fear, that cause quakes in the boots of the elite. And Professor Small even goes as far as to say that Rizza Islam is as dangerous analytically today as was Malcolm X. So I had a number of negative reactions to that, starting with, of course, Rizza. Can only say that I've seen him in a number of interviews and discussions and panels. So I have not read any of his work. I'm not an expert in it. But the simple fact of him still being in the Nation of Islam, with all due respect to the nation and even my family in the nation, with all due respect, the analysis of the nation is not the same as Malcolm. Even if we could say, even as I may say Malcolm's is better, at minimum, we would say it's different from the analysis that he existed then and now in coming out of the Nation of Islam. Rizza Islam's analysis of the world is not one of radical internationalism, anti-capitalism, guerrilla warfare development, socialism by another name, whatever you want to call it. It's not the same. And the context of that comparison was in a discussion of how the Breakfast Club, and the changes it's going through with Angela Yee stepping down or whatever, being afraid to have Rizza Islam on because he speaks so much openly and critically about the vaccines and about Fauci. Never mind that I disagree with Islam about the vaccines and about Fauci. To say that analysis causes fear in the Breakfast Club akin to the fear caused in the mainstream media by Malcolm X, that's not a sound argument, with all due respect to Professor Small, the elder. That's not sound. But that's where they were starting with the discussion, that these are the least afraid, most powerful radical spokespeople, freest Black men on the planet. So I just wrote here. In fact, I was driving, so this is a transcription. I said, so Rizza Islam, we start off with the whole question of the vaccine trying to sound super radical. Then they can start off with the radical bona fides that lead us to a conclusion of Black capitalism without talking about the Breakfast Club not welcoming Rizza Islam because he's too dangerous, because he talks about Fauci and the vaccine. They will bring people on. But they will bring people on from the Nation of Islam and elsewhere to talk positively about Black capitalism, or indirectly about Black entrepreneurialism. They don't want to call it capitalism, or the power of Black businesses. And then Boyce had to interject with all the hate of the Breakfast Club that he had himself been a welcomed invitee to that platform. And of course he would be, because they're not the threat. To equate a critique of Fauci. So from the and anti-scientific arguments about vaccines with the arguments around Malcolm X and Black liberation, that's just, so I was disturbed by that. Then, of course, and that's really okay. Then, of course, and here's the clip I will play, because this is obviously they talk literally about what has become almost my singular focus at this point.
You know, last year we recorded that Africans in America spent $1.6 trillion. If that's true, we shouldn't have a single unemployed person in America. If that's true, we shouldn't have a single brother or sister going to prison in America. So what is wrong there? If we spent that much, the reason it doesn't have an effect, and this comes back to you, Brother Rizza, you see, because it is how you give direction to the money, how you give direction to the mind that creates the ideas that interpret how monies are used. That's what people are afraid of. It's okay, they got money, let them make all the money they want. Long as there's nobody saying, hey, yo, come here. There is a method to the money madness. How do you spend it? How do you make economic, politics, and culture produce food, clothing, shelter, and safety for you and your family? How do you use economic, politics, and culture with economics at the foundation, right? To get control of land, labor, and resources where you live. That's what they're afraid of, those kinds of directions. And to put it in a framework and in a conversation that the youth understand, because we say youth, but we're talking about the most college-educated group of Blacks in the country, in the history of the country, the most technically educated groups of Black in the country, in the history of the country, the wealthiest group of youth in the country, in the history of the country, from our community, and they need guidance and direction.
Fact.
That's what it's about.
So, and it's slick. I mean, you really got to pay, you got to pay attention to the whole conversation and the way it's laid out. But so on the one hand, Professor Small is incorrect in accepting any legitimacy behind that buying power number, but he is correct in raising questions about the intersection. What I think he's describing is the absence of political power, broadly speaking. But he does recognize in that comment that there is more than the blind pursuit of wealth, or that without a certain consciousness, it is of no value. But the way that is allowed to be carried now, of course, the brother in the tank top, I was just like, what are we doing here? But his whole thing is about fitness and self-defense and armed, and having arms. And his whole thing is, I tell everybody to get guns so that we can defend what it is that we create, as if that's, I think there's an equal level of fantasy. That's another, I don't know, but there's an equal level of fantasy in this notion of being armed, and what the potential of that is, and what that allows and doesn't allow. But for Rizza Islam, what it ends up allowing him to do by the end of the conversation is to leave room for the idea, and this is where the complication of the messaging, the complicated messaging plays out, that a critique of an absence of consciousness and culture and politics leaves room for the argument that Black capitalism and entrepreneurialism can be effective if under the guidance of a politically educated and consciously clear African or African community. The approach, the frame of it in this conversation still allows for the conclusion that we don't have to engage in socialism. We don't have to engage in a struggle for political power. And again, political power being the not Democrat Republican, but a control of land, labor, resources. The power to define phenomena and have it act in a desired manner. And again, I am intentionally vague. That was another criticism that I got. We'll have to come back to. But I am intentionally vague in these spaces as it regards that, because I'm only trying to get us focused in that direction. I don't know how that will form or take place, and that's not for public discussion. But the public component of the discussion, from my perspective, humbly, is that we have to get past this idea that even with the right mind frame, we can get into some business development and we can raise the level of cash that we need to either engage the political struggle or then to sort of separate in some sovereign autonomy. As if, again, the colonization of Black people here and abroad is not fundamental to the broader colonial imperial project of the United States and its allies. In other words, this idea that Black people could get themselves together and separate that and remove themselves in any way, shape, or form from the current role played in the economy without a kind of struggle that even that brother with the tank top and the guns is not prepared for, is fantasy. So Rizza Islam specifically comes back and starts describing, you know, part of what he says is that we're in a new world where there are new ways for Black people to make millions of dollars, including as gamers. He says we don't need PhDs anymore to run the industries that PhDs are trained to be in leadership of. And then he cites Bill Gates as an example. He does say, throw in the caveat, you know, I know it's different with him being white and male, and of course that's the point, but he glosses over that to say that we're in a new world now. In other words, we don't need PhDs. We don't need traditional training. We don't need to go to their schools. We can do all of this ourselves if we're not afraid. And we can generate wealth for ourselves in so many different ways in this new world and new economy. But we're too afraid, and the mainstream keeps us away from that message because of they are fearful of that level of analysis. And by the way, they're not. That level of analysis is welcomed everywhere. They're only condemning Islam currently because of his arguments around Fauci and the vaccines, which I largely disagree with myself. So I don't know. But it's clear the Breakfast Club and elsewhere have no problem promoting Black entrepreneurialism, business development, capitalism. None whatsoever. Are making millions of Black gamers are making millions of dollars and earning money and becoming rich. Different mean from how funny was going to the Panthers if a new economy or there's a new relationship to the. Oh yeah, so I was right. I was saying that he's suggesting that this, again, with new technology and new media, that there is a new relationship to the economy held by Black people, and I think that is again missing the entire point. He says that Rizza Islam went on to say in that interview that my own generation and other generations are afraid to get over the fear factor because people like Bill Gates have taken over control of the medical industry without degrees in medicine. And I'm saying as if this is a good thing. Like, this is not the world I think we should be working for. I don't want people to be running industries or having influence over industries, particularly medical industries, which they have no training. I don't want our condemnation of the existing academic structure to turn into a condemnation of the idea of academic training. And I don't want to suggest that because people can sell their labor playing video games all day, by the way, which does not create. We've even showed a clip, I think last year, of a brother trying to, he demonstrates how you're not going to make a lot of money. Most people are not going to make a lot of money playing these video games. And then do we want people playing video games? And even the reports have been saying that the people who do this, like, they're not having fun. They're not enjoying themselves. It's not a fulfilling job to play all day a video game that may be boring or disinteresting, or after time, just repetitive and keeping you locked in a room all day. Why would we, so for him to so anyway, just to connect it back to what Professor Small was saying, ultimately the point I'm getting at is that by misunderstanding the buying power mythology, let's just start there. which encourages a false belief in this pool of money that Black people would have access to, and if we had the right mindset, could use differently, misunderstands everything about the economy. The money Black people have to spend is money that the system allows them to earn for the explicit purpose of returning into the economy, recirculating into the economy through the purchase of goods and services that they do not own. In fact, I had put this in the leftovers column, but let me pull this up now to sort of try to make this, because what is happening to the within the internal colonial experience of Black people in the United States is a microcosm of what is happening broadly to working people and on different levels to the entire laboring class, as Dr. Turner talked about. But the issue is, as I talked a little bit about in the Buying Power book, the issue is not to give an actual assessment for Black people or others of their economic condition. It is for those in power to manage, to constantly, again, this is what's happening with this discussion of the recession and inflation. The issue, after all of the language and the discussion, the core issue is only and ever the elite's ability to find that point at which they can pay people low enough to increase profits, but enough that those working people don't rebel and can still afford to purchase the things that they are producing, that if cannot be purchased, stops the economy, stops the wealth creation, and requires the slowing down or the recession until the elite can rehire, restock up, resupply their, and then get and get to the point where their productive capacity requires more consumption. Then they can loosen up the spigots, pay people a little more. So that's the issue. It is not that Black people have $1 trillion that if somehow was put under the brain trust of Rizza Islam and Boyce Watkins could be then deployed in the economy in such a way that would allow for Black people collectively to come up. That's not, it's again, only $1.6 trillion. That's less than 1/20th of the whole GDP. It's, as I showed, not even 1/8 of the buying power of whites. It is akin, as is being reported lately, as we've talked about recently, the buying power of the LGBTQ community. In other words, the idea that Black people have this money and are ignorantly not spending it in wise ways, but could, if we were better, more financially literate, is the mythology that is inhibiting our understanding of the economy and our need to develop a political power. It also allows for the encouraged propulsion of a Black capitalist mythology to continuously work against Black people's ability to organize all of these problems out of existence. So then you can have nominally radical people have a conversation about being the least afraid, the most powerful, the most dangerous, and all they're advocating at the end of the day is Black entrepreneurialism, Black business, and in supporting the larger economy in doing so. There is no threat to imperialism, to white capital, by Black capital or capitalism. That's why the BLA, we started off with their statement on this. It is absolutely correct. Don't let the fact that it's coming from the Black Liberation Army and not a think tank in Harvard make it any less correct. Black people can never accumulate, can never catch up, regardless of how we pool our resources or And again, I want to continue to argue none of that should be necessary. We shouldn't have to be good business people to benefit from the wealth we create as consumers, as workers. It just shouldn't, it's not necessary. All right. But I wanted to share from my good people at the Wall Street on Parade the story from the other day. Astonishing charts from the New York Fed show the dire straits of U.S. consumers during the 2008 crash and its aftermath versus today. Now, the details of the difference are not my interest per se, and I don't pretend to understand everything that's all the details. But what is of interest to me here is that it is being said by those in charge of the economy today that consumers are in a good place, that things are that we're in a good spot. So at his July 27th press conference, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said this: households are generally in about as strong a financial shape as they've been in a very long time, or perhaps ever, given the money that's on people's balance sheets. So you have from a financial stability standpoint, you have a pretty decent picture. So the argument is that people in this society, consumers, are in a good spot. They have more money on their balance sheet, maybe than ever. But as the Martins go on to say, the Fed released its household debt and credit report for the second quarter of 2022, and it showed total household debt rising by $312 billion in the second quarter to reach an historic high of $16.10 trillion. Also setting a new historic record was mortgage debt, which climbed to $11.39 trillion and represented 70.5% of all household debt. So primarily my point is always in these instances, from the perspective of those who own the economy, consumer debt, whatever relative instability that might cause, is of less interest. The economy does well for them when people owe, and when it can be claimed that people have money to pay their debt. It doesn't mean that these people have a legitimate, free and clear pool of money that they can do with what they will. And if they have financial literacy, they can blah, 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 blah. It means that they have money on their balance sheets that can allow them to pay their debt. Now, what the story goes into is that one of the reasons they can do that is because of the stimulus that they've gotten, and that it's not based on what is actually being generated through the regular flow of the economy. So what they're saying is, without saying it, is when we give people money, it can be recirculated back into the economy, and that's good for those who own the economy. It does not mean that consumers or Black people or anyone else have this pool of money that they can use in any way that they want and somehow become sovereign, autonomous, and free. It means that they have now more money to feed back and to recirculate into the economy, thereby enriching those who own it. What neither Fed Chair Powell nor the New York Fed report is telling the public is that things could deteriorate very fast without all the stimulus money and debt relief that Congress enacted to deal with the pandemic. One hint came from the following snippet in the New York Fed's report. Although foreclosures have been very low due to the moratoria on new foreclosures and mortgage forbearances, 35,000 individuals saw new foreclosures on the credit reports, an increase from 24,000 in the previous quarter, an uptick potentially suggesting the beginning of a return to more typical levels. An increase from 24,000 foreclosures to 35,000 foreclosures is actually an increase of 45.5% in a 3-month time span. This sounds pretty scary to us. So, in other words, as I'm reading it, despite the people who own the economy saying that we're in good shape and that people are in good shape, the reality is very different. And that's almost always the case. When the economy is said to be doing well, that does not mean that poor people and Black people are doing well. It means that if anything, it means that poor people are functioning well within the economy to produce wealth for those who own the economy. And that's how we need to understand, if anything, the buying power point. That it is not power as we conventionally encouraged to believe the term means. And this is a point that I think is consistently missed and encouraged be missed in conversations like the one Boyce Watkins was hosting the other day. So quite the contrary. So you have George Jackson, the BLA, and others saying that Black capitalism is a myth, that Black entrepreneurialism is not a solution. Even Dr. King said it. So to the point to challenge the point raised by Rizza Islam and the rest, are these people not fearless? In other words, are they less fearless than Rizza and Boyce Watkins? Are we saying that Rizza Islam is more fearless and strong than Malcolm and these others were who condemned Black capitalism as a pathway? Was Fred Hampton less fearless? Because my point is, the defenders of Black entrepreneurialism and capitalism they're not able to demonstrate with data the inaccuracy of the critique of Black capitalism. They can't demonstrate that. So they can only, it seems, it gets dressed up as some sort of radical, powerful endeavor. But all it ends up doing is enriching the broader economy and leaves Black people incapable of developing competitive wealth and resources, and ultimately then blaming each other as being financially illiterate and fearful, which again, going back to where I started years ago with the buying power critique, one of my core complaints was and is that people who adopt the mythology are become leaders in the condemnation of their own community for being poor, as if they're poor because of their own ignorance, financial illiteracy, or fear. And that's not at all the case. So. All right. One last quick thing that I wanted to just raise here, and then I'll check the comments in the chat. So if you have something you want me to see, please raise it up. We're not mad to get a super chat if you definitely want me to see it, but definitely start putting it back at the top of the list here, and I'll come to it in a second. But there was something I meant to, I finished watching that HBO series on anarchism, what they called about anarchism, which is really about anarcho-capitalism. And again, shout out to Lorenzo K. Irvin for breaking that down for us in his book and in his interview with us. Please go check that out. But as I was watching, I think the last episode, they were talking about the last couple of years of events that they were hosting in Acapulco to promote anarcho-capitalism. And they were showing flyers from the event, I think in 2021. And one of the flyers had this big graphic that featured Ron Paul and Cynthia McKinney. So I guess to somewhat make the connection here, and why I think what we're attempting at BPM is so important, is that with all due respect to our dear sister Cynthia McKinney, someone I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with a little bit, supporting, interviewing, road tripping with. I just feel like if you find yourself on an invitation to an anarcho-capitalist event on a flyer with Ron Paul, I think it's time to rethink the value of the visit. And we can't have which is a lot of what I've seen happening with the critiques of the economy that go in a lot of critiques, including the reverse hashtag, the anti-soda hashtag movement. People start with a legitimate criticism and then are dragged to the right. Cynthia has legit criticisms of this world, but why would you allow yourself to be dragged to the right in your analysis and in your comradeship? I get it. There's checks involved with these invitations. We all like to be invited. We all want to see us, or many of us want to see our name in lights and all the big. But I would like to think, because I have done it when there is either no money or very little money. But I would like to think even if there's big money and a trip to Acapulco, that if you got me sitting next to, like the other day, somebody sent me this event, people like Cornel West and others are sitting on panels and at same events with people like Tim Pool and all this stuff. And this is where people, under the auspices of an event, that this is where thinking people are going to think together. Come on now. Like we can't accept every invitation to every event to sit with everybody. And I think that, so anyway, but more to the point, I'm to stay on point here is that I do see a parallel with the continued readoption of Black capitalist politics as a solution. We keep getting dragged to the right, even when there's a nominal radicalism at play. Yeah. Anyway. Let me see if there's any comments or questions. Otherwise, I will wrap a little early and head off to my faculty meeting. Big shout out to Morgan State University and Sociology Department. Congratulations. And we just had another faculty meeting the other day. They would talk about how the Great Resignation has impacted the university. And they need people, they're hiring. There's some job openings. In fact, one of my, more recent favorite colleagues just submitted that stepping away from the university. It's like, wow. Not your boy. How do we totally do away with Black capitalist separation without a viable alternative? I don't have all the answers, Anthony. I think I do like I like my own approach to it, which is simply to say, stop attaching revolution and solution to Black entrepreneurial and capitalist projects. So again, I am not saying that there should be no development or support of Black business. I'm not saying there should be no effort to pool resources and so on and so forth. What I am saying is that these are not going to solve the problem. They're not even going to make the problem any better. So I want to reinvigorate or add support to existing and continuing arguments that condemn this and say we need political power. How we define that and how we get it, again, that's not for a YouTube discussion, but we have got to stop saying that we have a pool of resources, that if we're more financially literate, if we're less afraid to support Black business, if we're more willing to start feeding ourselves and growing our own food and developing that's not possible. There was about a year in grad school where I worked for a project that was supposed to develop urban farming in Prince George's and Montgomery County here in Maryland. Now, there was a lot of fraudulence in that project, top to bottom, a lot. But one of the very obvious problems that I realized in going all around the county looking for viable plots of land where you could start some of these urban farms was that there's not a lot. There's not a lot of land and not a lot of people who want to give you access to that land so that you can develop food growing for your Black radical project. You still need political support. You need local politicians. You need zoning access. You need business agreements. You need all kinds of things to happen. Or you can just do very small scale, individual, all kinds of vertical growing and small plots in your community and in your property. But that's not going to equate to a food system that feeds and distributes food to tens of millions of people. It's also not defensible without the political power to defend it. So even if I had gotten a project off the ground, anybody could have come 5 minutes later and turned it upside down. So again, that's really all I'm saying, at least in this initial part. I'm just trying to say, and by the way, entrepreneurial endeavors that aren't clear in the consciousness in condemning capitalism also, again, lead to these problems of analysis and behavior. How has any former colony ended its colonial relationship, if there has ever been an example of that happening? None of those liberation struggles centered, if at all involved, the development of small business, especially when you have no access to land. You're not in your own land. You don't have land. There is no land. There is nowhere to go. Again, that argument years ago, where Haile Garima screamed at me in front of a group of students in Sankofa because I asked if Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party's efforts equated to his definition of maroonage, and he said no. What did the Panthers do? What land did they conquer? What currency, he actually said, what currency did they develop? Where did they go and separate themselves? And I was saying, but where could they have gone? What hills are Black people in this country supposed to run off into? Isn't an aggressive attempt to control the politics and economy of your own neighborhood and community equatable in a 20th century sense to Maroons? No. Again, so my point is that there's an unfair an inadequate assessment of the condition of Black people here and elsewhere, for that matter, and what can be done. And anyway, and again, I would have thought it was enough, but once you see the video or read this transcript of the video from Selling the Negro, or once you go back, as I did again and should have done for the first edition, Gerald Horne's book on the Black press that Roland Martin totally misunderstood and distorts, as I discussed in a previous video. What is clear is that there is a state-sponsored, a history of a state-sponsored attempt to promote to Black people this idea that Black capitalism is a solution. They want Black people. They want us thinking that Rizza Islam's critique of Fauci and vaccines and promotion of Black business is the most radical we can get. That's what they want. So again, unscientifically, before you even get to all the research that even just I alone have put together, never mind all the other people's works that is far more extensive than mine, but just even mine alone, before you even get to that, the simple fact that this is what they advocate for us should be all the bells and whistles and flags should be raised at that. So I don't, and this is facts. Pro-Black is not necessarily revolutionary. Jamil Alameen's line that what is it? Being Black is wonderful, but it's insufficient. Something to that extent. I don't know. I mean, you know, so that's you know what I'm saying. And again, my favorite statistic: 2 million Black jobs created, 2 million Black businesses created from 92 to 2012. And the capture of national sales revenue went down from the whopping 1% to 0.3%. So it literally works against Black wealth. The creation of Black businesses literally works against the accumulation of Black wealth, which is still headed to zero by 2053. I was just looking at it again. Adam Smith said this in his chapter on the origins of money. A way to manipulate people who would otherwise not be manipulated. That's what money is. Which is why I'm fascinated more. I look at this modern monetary theory argument. It's a very mainstream, very non-radical argument, but it just basically says in an economy such as this one, in a society such as this one, where you have land and resources and productive capability, the United States can print as much money as it wants in certain sectors, invest in those sectors, and do whatever it wants. So as I was driving up, that's why I'm saying shame on white folks. As I'm driving up to Ithaca this weekend, I'm saying, is it an issue of resources? So this is the thought argument or puzzle I was working on in the car. Because I kept thinking, why can't this country invest in all of the construction operations that exist and say, look, if you have a construction operation, gear up to your maximum capability, whatever your status is, big, small, whatever, because we're coming with some federal money for you. So whatever capacity you are, small, get all your crew together that you can get all your resources that you can get, gear up to your full capacity. And one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to send you all up and down the Susquehanna Trail, fixing the houses of white folks. I don't even care about Black people yet. I'm thinking for the federal government. You don't care about if you're Black or brown and happen to be in this trail, you might benefit. But we gotta get white folks together. White folks, I'm looking at this totally backwards today. No disrespect to BlackAugust, but I'm like, we got to get the white folks. We got to fix white folks first. Come on, man. White folks can't have gone through all this enslavement and colonization and violence and bloodshed to be left in the conditions that they're being left in. We got to fix them. We'll get to all the other folks later. But straight up, though, seriously, I'm saying, like, is it an issue of a lack of wood or whatever was necessary to create cement or brick or whatever? Like, are we like, because it's like, gear up, we're going to fund you, fix all these people's houses. Let's get people's dwellings straight. Let's get them. I don't know. I don't know if environmentally we can do all the air conditioning and all the whatever, but like fix the structures of the houses. People shouldn't be living in these conditions. Let's get people out of, project housing. And if they want to be in trailers, like if that's their personal choice, let's at least fix up the camps, the trailer parks, the trailers themselves. Let's provide jobs for these people. Let's like modern monetary theory suggests, if I'm reading it correctly, that this is something that could be done. This is a political issue. Again, because the wealth created for the elite requires this level of inequality. And that's why I keep saying, in terms of our condition and this idea that Black people can, without a struggle, just sort of quietly build business, save money, get financial literacy, get our consciences together, become autonomous and sovereign, and and thrive. That's nonsense. The value of the dope boy on the corner to the broader economy of the society is by itself too important. You can't clear that up. You all check John Potash and other people's work on that, all of that money laundering, all of the billions and trillions that are siphoned into this economy through the drug trade. You can't get, and that, by the way, keeps destable all of these internally colonized communities. You can't, just simply cleaning up the hood. This is why Matulu is still locked up. Never mind the brinks and the guns and all that. Just simply getting people off of dope and out of the dope game. You're going to mess up the economy. You're messing up the function of Black people in this economy. What did Big Worm say? Mess with my money, mess with my emotions. Money is about manipulation, manipulating people who would not otherwise be manipulated. That's why that report from the Mertens was saying what it's saying. That's why the discussions of inflation and recession are saying what they're saying. None of those discussions are real beyond what they mean in terms of people's ability to be manipulated. Why are so many people resigning? Between their jobs sucking and them being exploited at those jobs and having some resources thrown at them, relatively speaking, and maybe some other opportunities. That's all you need. So how do you stop that? What did we show the other day? The story from, what was it, the dude from Bank of America? It's the same thing in that Mertens report. If we give people too much, going back to my buying power stuff, if we give people too much, they won't work at the wages and at the jobs that we want them to work, and they won't. Meaning we'll have to slow down the production, which means we have to slow down our profits, which means we have to raise interest rates. We have to get people to stop shopping. We have to get money out of the economy. We got to collapse some things a little bit. We got to get people desperate again. We got to get people willing to go back to that job they had at Morgan State last week, getting exploited and underpaid. Why else would you leave? Overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. Why else would you leave? So how do you get people back? I mean, so this is all that they're interested in. How do we pay you enough to not rebel and buy our products and make us rich? That's it. Anyway. Wait a minute. Thank you, Dead Man Animations. I think it's important to highlight the serious solutions won't be found online, but in the streets. Ops set critical under mass surveillance. Again, that's why I keep saying, I mean, I'm intentionally vague. Again, because I don't have the solution. And I think it's ridiculous that I or any one person would sit up here and say, I got it figured out. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I have some suggestions, some ideas, some fantasies, but I don't know what to do. But I do know that it's not going to be just figured out here. It's not going to be figured out here. So I'm with you on that. And thank you for the super chat. And again, when I'm saying political power, I'm not talking about voting. I feel like I have to do a better job of being clear. I don't know if this is part of what you're responding to. I'm not saying political power, meaning voting necessarily at all, or certainly in the current structure. I'm saying political power, the ability to control land, labor, resources, define wealth, how it's distributed, to be able to defend that, to be able to determine that there will be no levels of exploitation that we see. That's what I'm talking about. Now, how do we get that power? We're not going to get it by this mythology of we got to use our buying power better and we got to save our pool of resources, and then we're going to start buying into the political system, and then we're going to get the power because that's how every other group has done it. That is not how any group has done it. There is no group that has done that. No group has gone from oppressed to free in that way. So that history is entirely distorted and misunderstood and misrepresented under the guise of manhood and strength and fearlessness. I would agree with this, Curtis. Voting has done more for Black people than entrepreneurialism. I would agree with that. Ultimately, I would agree with that. And that's relatively speaking, because neither has led to much, but relatively, yeah, I would agree with that. Voting is only a piece. So anyway, listen, let me end where I began. Rest in power to Dr. James Turner once again. Deepest respect to what was done with the Africana Studies and Research Center, what continues to inspire me personally and many others around the world. And I'm glad Professor Asi Lumumba made that point that she made Saturday. She travels the whole world. So she was literally talking about people in South Africa, in Ghana, in London, in wherever. She was like, everywhere I go, how is Dr. Turner? Where is Dr. Turner? What is, you know, and now that he's gone, they're all saying, you know, and again, he was talking about the elaborate conspiracy. We are in an elaborate conspiracy to simply internally colonize Black people here. And I'm arguing one small facet of that is the projection and promotion of this idea that some variant of entrepreneurialism or capitalism is a solution. We gotta dead that, or as Bob Brown would say, we gotta shotgun that idea. So, all right, good people. How did the Chinese become economic giants? First of all, they have an enormous landmass. They had internal conflict and struggle. They had cultural revolution. They had the productive capacity to develop a military, to develop resources, to enact political power over their country, their community. Internally, though, again, they had a struggle. I'm no expert on this, but they fought. They had a struggle. Civil wars. They were themselves imperialists. If you look from the perspective of Vietnam and Korea, for example, they don't look good. The Chinese don't look good. From the perspective of the Japanese, the Chinese don't look good. Now, one or the other may or may not be right or more right than the other, but the point is, that's what they did. And then they set upon a path where they announced, as we covered here earlier this year, to eradicate serious poverty in their country. And one of the things they did was not just give people money and jobs, but they did simple things. One of my favorite parts that I remember from the story was they simply moved people in closer proximity to their place of business and to their family, so people could walk to work and walk to care for their loved ones and didn't need umpteen sitters or car rides and gas bills and all that just to make it easier for people to live. They enacted public policy. So again, they did not eradicate poverty by telling poor people to start a business and pool their resources. No, they pooled the resources of the entire nation and redistributed them. That's how they did it. And I'm sure my summary and analysis of the development of the Chinese economy was perfect. 100% perfect.
He's full of shit.
Oh man. I would like to, yeah, if you got a link to one of these specific lectures, I'd love to see it. I have not seen him do that actually, so I've missed that whole thing. I like that. Detox from materialism. That should be like a fasting day for BlackAugust. Me too. Anyway, all right, good people. Thanks for joining me today. Please come back tomorrow for the Remix Morning Show. I'll be back on Friday for sure, and probably on Wednesday for the remix. Check out all the things happening on the channel, all the Warrior class drop, the Sundays, everything that people are doing. With the Asada series that we dropped. I got to get my man on here to talk with him about that. But the Asada Chant series, please check all of those out. Very important histories, well done. well summarized and presented. We're trying to support their work, and they've, so please check that out. And as always, as Fred Hampton used to say, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like in BP.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.